Hello again. Welcome back to English 242, American Literature since 1865. I am, as always, your instructor, Dr. James Altman. Remember, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always email me or put it in the chat, or we can talk over Zoom, either one-on-one or in a group session, whatever is more convenient for you. All right, today we're going to get into the World of Walt, some background on Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman, the man who would become the good gray poet, one of only a few writers in the conversation for the quintessential American writer, was born May 31st, 1819, in West Hill in upstate New York. His father was pretty much what would have been thought of at the time as a typical American. That is, he was of English working-class Yankee descent. If you're not sure what that means, you can either think of the character described in the song Yankee Doodle or the characters in Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Whitman's mother was descended from old Dutch landed aristocracy that had been in that area of New York for not quite 200 years prior. If you've ever wondered where the New York Knicks, officially the New York Knickerbockers, got their name, that's where. Like most people in their area, the Whitman family didn't have a whole lot of money. Consequently, young Walt's formal education ended at the age of 11. You may be saying to yourself, wow. To that, I would say yes and no. While many people at the time were able to get at least a bit more formal education, Whitman's situation was not all that different from most Americans of his time. Public schools, as we know them today, didn't really exist in that era, and the notion of compulsory education was pretty much unheard of, whereas apprenticeships were one of the main ways for individuals to learn skilled trades. Walt Whitman began such an internship at the age of 12 with the newspaper The Long Island Patriot. Mind you, just like somebody might do today, he picked up side hustles wherever he could. The most important of these was as what we today would think of as a freelance writer. In 1834, his first short sketches started appearing in the New York Mirror, which was a much more prestigious paper than the Patriot. The most important thing to think about, as far as it goes, is that he fell in love with the printed word and the idea of words on the page. Throughout the rest of his life, as often as he could, in just about any form his writing took, he made clear that the excitement of seeing his words in print never went away for him. What they called the printer's art, what we today think of in terms of layout, fascinated him, and he was continually thinking about how placement on the page could affect the meaning of his words. Owing to sheer financial necessity, from 1836 to 1841, Whitman worked as a school teacher on Long Island. He taught everything from early elementary students to high school seniors, often at the same time and in the same room. Today, we'd call his methods fairly standard, middle of the road as far as what's thought of as a student-centered classroom. Back then, though, they were pretty revolutionary. He did things like having his students turn in drafts before the final assignment was due, having students critique each other's drafts, engaging his students in discussion, and encouraging them to form discussion groups, rather than just requiring rote memorization. He used games and the popular media of the day, particularly newspapers and magazines, to stimulate his students' thinking. Also, he refused to use corporal punishment on any of his students. He didn't believe in the idea so prevalent at the time that sparing the rod spoiled the child. Also, during this period, Walt Whitman founded his own newspaper, The Long Islander. As editor, he championed many causes considered liberal at the time: improving paving on city streets, repairing and upgrading the sewer system, expanding public education, women's rights, and the consolidation of Brooklyn and Manhattan into a single city. That one would happen in 1898, a few years after his death, and give rise to the modern city of New York with the 5 boroughs. Even though the Long Islander only lasted a few months, it gave him his first real taste of putting everything together, start to finish, from idea to printed page. Throughout the rest of the 1840s and on into the 1850s, he worked for numerous newspapers in and around New York City and Brooklyn. As he had previously done, he carefully observed and commented on the goings-on in the area. He tried to depict everything as vividly as he could in order to capture it all for his readers. These same elements, in a more refined form, would eventually show themselves in Leaves of Grass. It's important to note here that during this period, he really did wholeheartedly embrace the abolitionist movement and the temperance movement. He wrote about them as often as he could, in every form that he knew. As we might expect from Whitman, he did his best to help the reader see and feel and experience everything with which he was concerned. The temperance movement particularly interested him, not just because of the huge amount of alcohol that your average American drank in those days, and the damage that that could do to society in general, but also because several members of his family struggled with alcoholism at various points in their lives. He himself admitted that he liked wine way more than he should. Mind you, he also said from the very beginning of his journalistic and literary career that he wanted to be the poet that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote about in his essay, The Poet. And one of the characteristics that Emerson ascribed to his ideal American poet was a love of wine. Consequently, whether Whitman was struggling more with the specter of alcoholism or with the thought of trying to live up to an ideal is a bit of an open question. It may or may not surprise you that during this time Whitman was better known as a novelist and short story writer. He didn't really bother with poetry, really, unless somebody asked him to. As a matter of fact, his novel, Franklin Evans or The Inebriate, published in 1842, sold about 20,000 copies, making it the most popular best-selling book that he wrote in his lifetime. As I said earlier, elements of what would later show up in Leaves of Grass were starting to emerge at this time, particularly the notions of everyone being united from the narrator's perspective. The only difference being in Franklin Evans, the idea that unites them is less the greatness of America and more their perspective on drinking, whether positive or negative. From September 1845 to early March 1846, he was a freelance writer. As such, he wrote a series of articles for the Long Island Star. He usually wrote 2 or 3 articles a week. They covered issues large and small, usually local in nature, but not always. He commented on everything from interest rates to construction projects to food and housing prices to which steakhouses served the area's best porterhouse, fried potatoes, and beer. Regardless of subject matter, he almost always gave some space to his cherished idea that the sister cities of New York and Brooklyn should combine into a single city, which he called Manhattan. As we said a little while ago, Whitman's wish came true shortly after his death when the modern city of New York emerged in 1898. By all indications, his articles resonated with people. He became the editor of the Brooklyn Eagle in mid-March 1846. On the positive side, the Eagle's style under Whitman was largely the same as he'd used at the Star. On the negative side, his personal perspective, and consequently the Eagle's, gradually turned more and more abolitionist. No bad thing today, but about as controversial as could be at the time. Think about the most controversial hot takes on the most divisive issues today. That's basically where Whitman was positioning himself and the Eagle. Mostly owing to these issues, he was removed from his job as editor in January 1848. He wouldn't be unemployed for long, though. Whitman became editor of the New Orleans Crescent in February 1848. As fate would have it, a couple of the Crescent's owners had spent time in Brooklyn and had become big fans of his work. The trip south from Brooklyn to New Orleans exposed Whitman to most of the United States of his time. The poor state of the roads, which anywhere outside of big cities, were basically backcountry dirt roads and wagon ruts, and the lack of railroads made it a slow, indirect trip of several weeks. On the bright side, the, let's just say, unhurried pace gave him a chance to experience many different types of people and professions up close and personal. He met, among others, bankers and lawyers in New Jersey, coal miners and dairymen in Pennsylvania, shoemakers in Delaware, iron workers, stonemasons, and meat packers in Ohio, corn farmers in Missouri and the then new state of Iowa, fishermen, sailors, and shipwrights along the Great Lakes and Chesapeake Bay, as well as cotton, rice, and sugarcane plantation owners and workers in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The journey helped broaden Whitman's conception of what Americanness meant and should mean to future generations. Most importantly, from his perspective, it really brought home the idea that there was more to America than just Long Island, Manhattan Island, Yankee farmers, and Knickerbocker aristocracy, and that all of it deserved to be seen, heard, understood, and above all, celebrated. Whitman treated his time in New Orleans a little bit like we would treat Mardi Gras. He developed a lifelong love for coffee and Creole cooking. He also made many friends among soldiers returning from the recently completed Mexican-American War. The affection he felt for them motivated his service as a nurse in the Civil War, and the poetry that inspired, especially drum taps. Unfortunately, he also witnessed the depth of America's racial divide for the first time. He attended slave auctions and forced himself to observe and document it all, even though it made him physically sick because he never wanted to forget. Also, he wrote that he wanted to try to understand how the United States, which he saw as the freest nation that could ever be, could justify denying freedom to anyone. Perhaps not surprisingly, his new bosses at the Crescent weren't any too thrilled when he started condemning what he saw and fired him within about 3 months. After returning to Brooklyn, he founded an abolitionist newspaper, the Brooklyn Weekly Freeman. It must have hit a nerve because right after the first issue came out, an unknown perpetrator or perpetrators burned the office down. You know, a lot of people might have looked for a whole new career at that point. Whitman not only rebuilt the newspaper office as soon as he could, but also turned the Freeman into a daily publication. Meanwhile, he began drafting some of the poems that would later appear in Leaves of Grass.